stations that are currently running, remember this are emergency OCGT, what do you call it, terminals that are used for actually capacitating the shortfall on the energy side of it. Where if certain power stations are not producing as required, they always go into emergency, shortfall.
Mm.
Shortfall means generation that is currently available and waiting for any emergency. So they use the diesel ones because it's faster, it's quicker to set up in terms of burning it up to a point where it can start running. Unlike the power stations, which takes about 4 to 5 days before the power station is ready to start generating. You would burn throughout those days until it's ready to start actually producing turbine steam that is required to actually generate electricity. In this case, ESCOM is sitting with the fact on the fact that right now it's actually having to rely on a lot of diesel generation on the basis that there is no sufficient power generation. A lot of power stations are down. Most of them, as we are told right now, the energy availability factor, which is the generation capacity of the whole over 100%, is sitting at about 58%, which means almost half of ESCOM's power fleet is currently down. So when you're having that situation, you must run into your emergency generation. Emergency generation uses diesel as well as gas, but in this case mainly diesel at this stage. And they actually make sure that they run those turbines. And it's extremely expensive. Right now, it's costing about 7% of ESCOM's turnover. Its revenue concentration goes to diesel payments and everything.
So, Arjun, we're not in a good position, are we? Because we're looking at the price of gas, diesel, fuel, etc., going up astronomically, thanks to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. So that's the one issue, uh, and the fact that ESCOM seems to be operating in an emergent situation more often than not. What's the implications on us? And let me just remind our listeners, I am talking to Adil Nchabeleng. He is an energy expert and also president of a company called Transform South Africa. Adil, back to you. Does that mean more bad news for us as South African consumers? And does that also mean that there's going to be more price hikes going forward?
In terms of price hike at the stage, is still contained in the sense that every year ESCOM would make an application to NERSA, and right now they've only been awarded about 9.7% increase that is allowable, which means they could charge up to that amount. But in terms of its own cost structure, you must expect next year, let's say end of this year, there should be another application for a price increase in terms of their revenue because they only recover the money that they spend back on the amount of money that actually is allowable. Given last year alone, I mean, ESCOM has spent in excess of 4.7 billion of diesel, which makes up diesel production accounts for about 7.4% of total cost. And that energy only produces 1%, of what ESCOM is currently using. So you can't have such a high cost at almost 470 rand in terms of the kilowatt hour in comparison, because remember we are only paying towards ESCOM about 180 cents at this stage in terms of kilowatt, but they are spending to produce the electricity that we are paying for at 186 cents. They are spending 470 cents. So the mathematics don't make sense in that sense,
Mm,
and
mm.
ESCOM is finding itself in a situation where it's actually going to hemorrhage in terms of its revenues and the total cost of all other unnecessary expenses. For instance, we've said that you can overload as much as you want the ESCOM balance sheet as well as income sheet with a lot of IPP. They are just going to cost you without having to produce you the electricity you want. So ESCOM is spending a lot of money on diesel, is spending a lot of money on IPPs, and they are not recovering any of that money through the energy generation. Your product which you're selling in ESCOM is just electricity. If your electricity does not equal your cost, you're starting to have a problem. And that's what we're seeing right now within ESCOM and its production. The cost of coal and everything else is contained and is still currently feasible. That's what is currently carrying ESCOM. And now with the major shortfalls, 21,000 megawatt about that is currently now a shortfall in the production cycle of the 48 billion, what you call a million, or 48,000 megawatts of electricity generated. So ESCOM is sitting with a total crisis that, nobody seems to understand. We've been saying this for quite some years now, that there is going to be a problem stage. And now this problem stage has arrived, and everybody else is actually just turning the other way and not wanting to say, okay, that we got warnings ahead of time, and that's why the warnings. We spoke about this thing many a times, and we indicated the mathematics, we indicated the economic side of it, we indicated the technical side of it, and the legal implications, and nobody was just interested to listen.
I guess not. We don't have the right people heading the country, unfortunately. So the buck stops where is the key question. Does this mean that we're going to be paying that much more for electricity? And then also the issue is there were talks not too long ago about allowing, uh, you know, a big business and even homeowners to go the solar route. And for some reason, we had heard that we'd be penalized for going that route. But wouldn't that be the answer or part of the answer?
Look, South Africa is a majority poor nation. You and I, we might relatively be able to
Mm,
make over 10,000 rands a month. The majority of this population, which is over 80%, are in abject poverty. So, as I said to you, that we are a developmental state, and the mathematics don't work. Over 30%, 47% of the electricity generation and consumption is at residential level. So, when we look at 47% of your population, your electricity generation going towards your supply of your households, in there, you have over 80% of them who are poor and indigent, mostly
mm,
in we call RDP housing setup, as well as settlements and everything else. If you start saying people must go towards solar, their houses are not even worth 50,000 rands in market
mm,
value today. To buy a solar system that will sustain you day and night, you need a minimum of at least 250,000 rands to be completely off grid, where you can do something tangible. It will just give you lights and everything. It won't heat, it won't cook, but it will give you storage capacity as well as harvesting of the sun. So, we talk like we're in Europe, and this is what I hear regularly. People must just go off grid and go on solar. If we could
mm,
all afford, we would all be not even wanting to buy anything from Eskom. But the affordability issue, given the fact that when apartheid came into effect, it made sure that it only built a system that only supported its population. At that point, it was about 5 million. They only built a system for about 5 million people. We came into power as African population, as African majority, under the ANC. We took over ESCOM and we did not do anything to service the expanding majority population that came out of the rural areas, came out of the Bantustans, moved into and migrated directly into the cities, and we were not able to produce the sufficient electricity generation capacity. We inherited everything from apartheid. The current engines that are running, that are generators, are all apartheid based, except for two, Muripi Kusile, as well as the Ngula pump station that is coming up. So we've done nothing in 30 years. And when the problem comes up now, we act as if, oh, there was enough sufficient capacity. There was never sufficient capacity. ESCOM should have been building power stations at a yearly basis of 10,000 megawatts. They didn't do that. If they've just done even 2,000 megawatts yearly, accumulatively over 30 years, it would have made a massive difference in terms of our situation. That is why we are in the most poorest abject situation. So the issue of electricity is central to every problem we have, whether it's bad leadership, bad accountability, uh, lack of vision, understanding of global economics and politics. And now there are mishmashing issues with Ukraine as well as Russia's war, which does not even affect them. They're not buying oil or gas or even diesel from Russia nor Ukraine. How does it affect? It's only affecting us on the basis that, one, there was no planning at ESCOM where they should have hedged their pricing on diesel at the global level, which means they should have put a cap and bought excess stock. If you know you're using annually, let's say, 100 million liters of diesel, right? You should have gone into the market and saying, how can I actually start making sure I protect myself against the price rise? That has not happened. They are buying on a spot probably right now, which means on a daily basis, as the price changes, they buy on spot and they negotiate discounts on bulk, which is a bad management, of any level. So the problems at ESCOM are multifold and mainly, deal with the fact that there's been a lackluster accountability, a level of leadership, and a failure in understanding the dynamics. There are four elements. One is technical, financial, economic, and legal within ESCOM. You solve these four elements properly and you deal with them and you don't become emotional. Generation of electricity, we have enough sufficient coal in South Africa. What could have been done with that coal? Instead, we became emotionally involved in all other things. They're canceling coal, they're shutting down power stations, they're causing a much more severe situation. And then we come and complain that there's Russia, Ukraine war, and diesel has to go up. When we're spending, in the last 10 years, ESCOM spent almost 50 billion on diesel alone. Unacceptable in any scenario. So,
Uh, you've painted a very, very frightening and a bleak picture. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But I must say, you've
thank you.
given us a very deep insight into this issue. And yeah, we do have lots to be worried about, and we do need to hold our leaders and our politicians accountable for the mess that we find ourselves in. Adil Nchabeleng, President of Transform South Africa and an energy expert, talking to us about keeping the lights on. Thank you indeed for your time, and salamu alaikum to you.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much.
9:58. We're going to now talk with Appa Mariam Mia regarding the story of Nadima Noor, who was in captivity by the Taliban. So please stay with us.